So in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about continuous, domain, and range. Continuous is going to be connected. Before we've been working with discrete domain and range, but now we're talking about continuous. So on our graphs, you're going to notice that all the lines are connected. Domain is going to be your x values, and you need to look from left to right. So your farthest left point and your farthest right point, because this is your x-axis. Your range is going to be your y values, so you need to go from bottom to top. So least to greatest. Each of the domain and range is going to be written in interval notation, so we're going to be using a lot of inequalities, a lot of brackets or parentheses, depending on where it's going. Now, if you want to take out two different colors, that's going to be really important to identify where it starts and where it ends for each domain. I'm going to use red for domain, and I'm going to use green for range. My domain is going to be, you need to look from left to right to find my x values. So if you notice, my farthest left point is -2, and my farthest right point is 4 on my graph. So I'm reading left to right. So my domain is my x values are between 2 and 4. So that means that x, that -2 is going to be less than x, but it's also going to, x is also going to be less than or equal to 4, positive 4. So x is between these two values. The interval notation is going to be a bracket, -2, comma, 4, and a bracket because we're including 2 and 4. This closed circle is indicating that we are including those values. Now for range, we're talking about the y value, so we're going to be doing the lowest and the highest point. So the lowest point here is, if you notice, is at -3, and the highest point is at 3. So my y values are between -3, and you're including those. The y values are between those two numbers. That's the lowest point, that's the highest point that it goes. And so I'm going to write it in interval notation. So I'm going to do bracket because I'm including -3, comma, +3 because I'm including 3. This next one, my domain, I'm going to make sure I use red again. I'm reading from left to right, so I want the farthest left point, which is at 0. So my x value is between 0 and 4. So I'm going to draw it on both sides, 4. But 4 is not included because of the fact that it is an open circle. So we're not including that. So I would write this as my x values are between, so we're including 0, and it's less than 4 because we're not including 4. So my interval notation would be a bracket because we're including 0, comma, 4, and then a parenthesis because it's all numbers that are less than 4. We're going to do our range, which is going to be green. So I want my lowest y point, which is going to be -2, but we're not going to include -2. And then my highest point is 2 on my graph. So I noticed that we're not including either of those. So my range is going to be -2 is less than y, which is less than +2. So it's going to be parentheses -2 because I'm not including the -2, comma, +2, parentheses because I'm not including the 2. My domain and range, I'm going to do my lowest point, or my farthest left point and my farthest right point. If you notice, this is very important, is that you notice my left point is this arrow and my right point is this arrow. So this means that my x values are going to just keep continuing, and so forth, because those arrows means that it never ends. So really, do we know which numbers are the end point? No. So what we do here is it's going to be all real numbers. Anytime you really see those arrows, this is going to be all real numbers. And that means that it can be any x values from all the way out if I just keep continuing this graph. So I'm going to make sure that I write it as negative infinity with a parenthesis, because I can't touch infinity, so that's why it's a parenthesis, comma, infinity, parenthesis. Now my range is a little bit different because I'm going to go left to right. If you notice, my range is at the bottom, so it's by the arrow, so I don't know when that's going to end, but it does end up here, and it does include the value 6. So it's all y is less than or equal to 6. So all my y values are less than or equal to 6. So I'm going to write this as, so remember it's bottom to top, and if I have these arrows, that's going to be my negative infinity sign with that parenthesis next to it, comma 6, because I'm including 6 because that's where it stops, and that's going to be a bracket. My last two examples. So now I have this graph down here. I always want my domain first, so I'm going to use my red again. My farthest left point is the arrow. My farthest right point is the other arrow. So remember, the arrow means that it's always just continuous and it's going to keep going, keep going, keep going. So I'm going to represent that with all real numbers. That means that all x values and all x values in the negatives or positives are going to be the answer. Now the range is pretty similar, so I'm going to use that green. I want my lowest point where I don't know where that ends, and I want my highest point. And I don't know where that ends either because I have those arrows that are continuous. So this is also going to be all real numbers. So that means that my interval notation is going to be negative infinity, comma, infinity, because it's going to go on and on and on and on, and I don't know when it's going to stop. My last domain and range. So again, I want my farthest left point, farthest right point. So if you notice, my left point is an arrow. My right point is the number 4. So it's all numbers that are less than 4. So my x value is going to be all numbers, so that's where I get the x, is less than or equal to 4. So my interval notation is going to be negative infinity with a parenthesis, comma, 4, because I'm going to include the 4 because it's that closed circle. Now my last one, I'm going to remember it's bottom to top, so the farthest point at the bottom is at 0 for the y. And then my farthest y point at the top is this arrow. And notice that this line is going to keep increasing, 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 and it can keep going up here. So I know that it's never going to stop. So it's all numbers. So it's all y values that are greater than or equal to 0, because it's going to be all numbers that are going this way. So my interval notation is going to be a 0 with a bracket, comma, a positive infinity, because it's all numbers that are greater than 0.